We do, of course, extend our sympathies to the good people of Australia. Well, Dr. Roland Ngam is a Program Manager for Climate Justice and Socio-Ecological Transformation at the Rosa Luxemburg Institute, South Africa. He joins us now. Dr. Ngam, good afternoon to you. It's what seems to have gone wrong. Why have the Australians, why have they run out of power?
Well, good afternoon, Stephen, and good afternoon to all the televiewers. Well, there is a combination of things happening here. We have problems with coal supply and flooding of coal supplies, and we also have a second problem that coal generation in parts of Australia, which are fairly old, also collapsed. And the backup supplies of gas really, because Australian suppliers do not have really a sole mandate to supply only to Australian power firms. When we had the problems in Europe after the attack of Ukraine, Russia invasion of Ukraine, most supplies have been going to foreign markets, even some supplies of coal. And so the combination of that and reluctance to expand more wind and solar capacity has led to this. Really a crisis which we've seen in countries in the region like China recently.
So they've got a problem basically generating enough electricity. As I understand it, one of their problems is that their coal production fleet is also a little bit old, which again sounds a bit familiar to most of us.
Yes, and this is really the reluctance to implement some of their renewables master plan, because Australia has a master plan to retire some of its coal fleet, replace that with solar and solar gas and wind. But unfortunately, obviously, for a number of reasons, because of reticence, because of people who believe that wind and solar are a mistake right now, and also because of lobbies, they haven't moved quickly enough, and in a country where there is a lot of solar and wind, and that has led Australia to where it is now, very much mirroring what is happening in South Africa. I don't know where the bragging rights are going to come from now, because Australians have been taking the mickey out of South Africans for a very long time, and suddenly now they're in the same situation.
I mean, what's so interesting about it, I nearly said entertaining, but what's so interesting about it is that they have huge resources of coal. They have a massive coal mine that's being developed ready to sell coal to China and India. That's actually become a major political issue in Australian politics. And here they are, not having to actually be able to use the coal. I mean, part of it, I think, has been flooding, things you can't really plan for. But it's also about just proper, simple grid management.
Yes, certainly, because Australia is a bit different from South Africa's situation, where you have centralized planning. We have something that is more similar to the American situation, where we have big power companies and we have spot selling of coal, spot selling of gas, and so on. And so because those are not working well right now, and because the local power companies are competing with companies abroad. Again, Russia invasion of Ukraine has changed the entire planet, the way we produce energy, the way we produce and consume food, etc., etc., etc. Because of the federation of all those things happening at the same time, Australia is where it is today. And these are really things that could have been avoided with more long-term planning, with more careful centralization of inputs.
There's another issue around all of this, Dr. Ngam, which tells you how difficult it can be to manage an electricity market. You talk about spot selling. As I understand it, they have a regulator that basically said you're not allowed to increase prices by above a certain amount, so people stopped selling the electricity. I mean, if I make, I don't know, cars, and you say you're not allowed to sell your cars for more than 100,000 rand, I'm going to stop making them. That's what happened here when it comes to electricity. I make this point because California has had the same problem for many years. They have not got their market right. I bring all of this up because we're trying to liberalize, make it easier to buy and sell electricity, or produce and sell electricity in our country. There are a lot of lessons from California. I hate to say they're things that we can learn from Australia, but maybe they are.
Yes, so you mentioned California, and we can also put Texas and some other countries and states in that mix. And so what really happens is that when you have a market where you do not have a main utility, in other words, you have different utilities that compete for sometimes inputs from the same market, it could work in the input company's favor in that they have a steady demand. But at the same time, when there is competition for resources, you end up with a major problem. And right now, for example, if people in Europe are ready to pay about 3-4 times more for the same supplies of coal and gas, some of these companies really would be reluctant to sell to on the local market, even though you also have the idea of the national interest that should prevail. But obviously, someone should impose that national interest. And so what we should ideally have, and this debate probably has been forestalled in South Africa in the sense that the government has decided that Eskom is going to control most of the transmission, and Eskom is really going to buy almost all the electricity from the producers. And something like that really is missing in the California model or the Australian model.
Look, Dr. Ngam, you and I can poke fun at Australia, and I mean, when should we stop? We should go all day, frankly. There may be one way that this could hurt us, though, which is that the Australians have shown over the years that they'll take, whatever, any cricketer, any football player, any rugby player going. If you are in charge of Australia's grid and you need someone who can manage load shedding, who can manage old coal-fired power stations, well, you'd look for another Mr. Labuskaghni and ask if he's also prepared to change his surname to Labuschagne. Do we need to worry about that?
Well, in a sense, obviously, not just from Australia, but I believe that Australia is going to be looking to South Africa for some skills. And frankly, it's not. It's a number of other countries as well that are setting up coal-fired power stations, that are setting up gas, also setting up nuclear. Egypt, some other countries in the Middle East as well. And so in the short to medium term, obviously, the panic that this has caused will certainly lead to Australians looking to South Africa. And this drain of skills could worsen our situation. And what all of this says is that we really should be looking at power systems that are easier to manage, easier to set up, and so on. I'm talking about solar and wind. Unfortunately, Australia seems to be doing all the wrong things right now, and that could also inadvertently worsen South Africa's situation.
Dr. Roland Ngam, thank you. Program Manager for Climate Justice and Socio-Ecological Transformation at the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. Well, look, if you are Australian, if you're preparing to go home, maybe you'll want to stay with us a little bit longer.